Welcome to Comic Book Herald's Creannotators. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of Comic Book Herald, and I'll be interviewing some of my favorite creators in comics about specific runs, graphic novels, or series, looking for their insights and inspirations behind the work. Today, I'm excited to welcome Sanford Greene, co-creator of Bitterroot, one of my favorite ongoing comics of the last couple of years, and a current Eisner-nominated work for Best Continuing Series of 2020. Bitterroot is the story of a black family of monster hunters in 1920s Harlem, quite literally fighting racism and the depths of man's hate, while trying to carve out hope for a future. Sanford, thanks so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. Can you start off telling us how Bitterroot came to be and your involvement on it?
Um, Honestly, we were still me and David Walker. We were working at Marvel on Power Man and Iron Fist,
Hmm.
um, and it was coming to the conclusion of that series, and we were having some conversations with Marvel about what's next. Truth be told, um, the only thing that I was interested in was either working on one of the bigger properties or doing a continuation of Power Man and Iron Fist.
Yeah.
And at that time, we had some back and forths on what would be best, and we just didn't seem to get a lot of traction on either at that time.
Yeah.
And we had some ideas that we wanted to do um, with um, with Power Man and Iron Fist that involved 1920s Harlem, and
Hmm.
we we just didn't get a lot of traction from it. And shortly afterwards, my other co-creator Chuck Brown had mentioned about doing something during the Harlem Renaissance time period, and it was just kind of like the synergy that happened where we were thinking, this is something that we're all thinking about. It might be just a good thing to possibly just create something on our own, and to some degree, uh, the stars just aligned in that sense, and Marvel, because there wasn't a whole lot of momentum in that direction. It definitely kind of gave us the incentive to do something creator on even more. We were coming off of something that was pretty acclaimed in Power Man and Iron Fist, and we felt that we had some momentum in that.
Yeah.
So we felt it was a good time to move forward with some creator own stuff. And that's in a nutshell how it kind of started to come together. We started having conversations and developing the ideas, and and pitched it to Image, and they were absolutely on board, which was extremely gratifying for us. So we got working on that right away. Um, well, I shouldn't say right away, but we definitely, between us having our development stage and having a few meetings with Image, and and then just kind of coming together on those two fronts. I would say within 6 months we were off to the races.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah, I was going to ask about you can see a little bit in your run on Power Man and Iron Fist with David Walker. You have some monster designs in there that kind of are you can almost see, like, groundwork being laid for some of the things that are in Bitterroot, I think stylistically too, just like those larger than life proportions of some of the
Yeah.
character designs. Definitely I love the way that you portrayed, Luke Cage in that book, an awful lot, and I think you see that in some of the work on Bitterroot. So, you mentioned this being set in 1920s Harlem Renaissance, which is certainly very appropriate and relevant. How does working in a fictional, almost period piece like this impact your design choices, I guess? Like, how much research and investigation was that something you were doing, as you were putting together character designs and kind of the world of Bitterroot?
It was a tremendous amount of involvement in research because I still do it to this day. Um, we also used because we just thought that this genre was kind of a perfect marriage, the steampunk element
Hmm.
where the Harlem Renaissance has something there that it seems like the two could just marry pretty seamless. And so that's honestly what made me even more excited about the project because those two um, genres, you hadn't really seen that, but at the same time, there's so many other genres that kind of fall into that that same aesthetic, the Victorian era, things of
Hmm.
that. It just seems like the Harlem Renaissance had a lot of those, aesthetics there. So we just thought that using steampunk design and influence was kind of again just an easy as it was an easy task. Truth be told, it because it's so vast that aesthetic, it kind of put me down this rabbit hole that there's times where I can lose days, possibly even weeks, just designing and researching and coming up with different you know aesthetics to create for our story. I mean, to some degree, we're like I said, I'm still doing that.
Hmm.
We're working on our 10th issue right now, and another genre is just kind of the fantasy element. We're hope I don't think this is a spoiler, but we're going to be using some more of that aspect of it as well, moving forward. And like I said, that time period, Harlem Renaissance, it's magical, if I can use that term. Um, it's just a magical time period that it's again all of it just kind of works seamlessly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite things about the book is all the design elements you're explaining, but also like the back matter, which explains, writers and artists like Zora Neale Hurston, right? And
Yep.
Langston Hughes, and just these like deep dives into the actual impact of the Harlem Renaissance. It adds a ton of just ability to kind of like really dig into what this world would be like, and it feels more lived in. I think understanding the actual American history, right? That is often not given as much of a spotlight. I think a lot of people, a lot of white people like myself, are realizing like that there's a lot more here to learn and to understand as a part of our nation's history.
Right.
How much is kind of that scholarly examination a part of? You mentioned the visual elements, right, of
Uh,
steampunk and of the period. How much is that scholarly examination of like Black cultural influence? Um, how much do you try and integrate that into your artwork and your designs?
um, it honestly is probably the number one element or
Mm,
influence because it, like I said earlier, the Harlem Renaissance, just the era was the aesthetics were already just so fascinating in terms of just how people dressed and carried themselves, and of course the arts, just all of that is influenced by that, right? And so it just kind of, it was just kind of an easy transition to marry um, those cultural influences and putting just a little more of a fantasy element to it, because honestly those that look and and that time period had a lot of that. I think um, history just has a way of, I think that what's the phrase, that art imitating life. It's kind of like,
mhm.
that's what it was. It's like, or what it is. It's just we, I'm looking at history and I'm like, man, this by itself is fascinating. To some degree, there's not even a need to do much more than what's already has been portrayed in our history. And if I could go a little farther, I mean, as much as we use that time period, we're using uh, time periods before that impact our history, especially in this country. But
Mhm.
we're doing and we're dropping seeds even prior to African culture. Things of those times, and so yeah, we're using a lot of those background elements, historical elements, to move our characters and story along.
Yeah, yeah, no, very cool. And it's definitely effective. I found it interesting in the book. There are a couple ways that hate and fear manifest into literal monsters. So
Hmm.
the at the start of the book, the first is sort of out and out racism, right? And it's the fear and hate that drives racism into literal monsters. These
Yeah,
Genu, I don't know, I've never
yeah,
actually said it out loud,
right,
but okay.
right.
Right, these monsters that the Sangre family is fighting. But then it kind of gets more complicated as the book progresses, and there's a new style of monster that is, the way I understand it, this more complicated, like legacy of generational trauma, right? And in this case, particularly predicated on the Tulsa Massacre of
Uh,
1921, which
yeah,
got, I think, a lot of. I think you guys had it in there early in Bitterroot, and then that same year, or I guess it was last year, Watchmen brought
yeah,
that to the forefront of a lot of people's awareness in a way that it hadn't been before.
that's
When
right.
you're designing monsters based on these awful real world things, you're literalizing them. How do
Mhm.
you differentiate those, like the different types? I guess what goes into your process in terms of how do I make racism a monster? How do I make generational trauma a monster? Because I don't think anyone would say that sounds like an easy thing to do.
Right. Truth be told, I kind of go off of instinct. Um,
Mhm.
when I'm in the middle of, designing or drawing the stories, there may be, truth be told, something that I've read or seen, um, in whether it be historical or just current events. You know, it's no secret of what we're dealing with right now.
Mhm.
Um, has a lot of relativity to the story that we're telling. Honestly, that's why we started telling the story to begin with.
Right.
Could digress on that, but yeah, a lot of it is just kind of a subconsciousness to what I design, and just kind of on a kind of a nerd surface level. I'm a huge fan of Jack Kirby, and his designs for uh, monsters, and for some reason I just thought, you know, there's this fine line that um, we're trying to dance with, when it comes to telling an intense story that has something that allows you to kind of see it for what it is, because hate, racial prejudiceness is ugly. It's disgusting.
Mhm.
It's so how can we convey that in this, physical or um, tactile manner?
Yeah.
Something that you can connect with in that sense. While at the same time, we don't want to. Uh, we're trying to reach as much, broaden our audience as much as possible. I've spoken and I've been reached out to by many um, scholars or teachers, if you will, from every level, from elementary to college.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so we started thinking about, how can we convey this to where, a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, we feel like our stories are in a place to where they could handle it, in reading it and digesting it. At the same time, we don't want to water it down. So I guess to kind of answer your question, that's why I kind of go on instinct a lot of times. And there's times where I look at something that I did, design wise, and I say, wow, that was that was pretty intense. I didn't realize I went there, but again, that's honest um, assessment, and that's something that to some degree I kind of applaud that I'm allowing that rawness to come forth on paper.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Okay. That's a good answer. I think it does come through definitely, and I think appropriately so.
Mhm,
In terms of the release schedule for Bitterroot, you guys took a year in between the first and second arcs thereabouts.
mhm.
Are there plans for a similar break after Bitterroot number 10, which I think will conclude the second arc?
Yeah, we kind of, in a weird way, with COVID happening and things of that nature, we almost kind of don't have a choice to some degree.
Sure.
So in a way, it we were heading towards that anyway. I think before COVID happened, because we have some other plans for some other things that we're trying to do. But well, a lot of that honestly has been canceled because we had a college tour that we were setting up, and
Mm,
of course all the comic cons and all the appearances. We had a lot of appearances this year, so we just knew that it part of it was important to connect with the people and be there and have those conversations in person with fans, but it also we knew that our schedule wouldn't allow us to be able to have that kind of consistency. So we knew that we needed to have somewhat of a break. We didn't think it was going to be next year, but
right.
we definitely was working around that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wondered if it had afforded you more creatively, but it sounds. I mean, possibly it does, but it sounds like in this case, it's just the state of
Like
the world and what are you
it,
gonna do?
in our
Yeah.
world. Yeah. I mean, and I would say that that's kind of what happened with our first arc. It wasn't intentional to, oh, let's take a year to and then come back. We started looking at just the trajectory of where we were when we finished the first arc, and we were at San Diego, and we had a big conversation about coming out in the fall of last year. And again, same thing happened. We were making appearances everywhere, and it was hard because you know it's that grassroots mentality, right? If we want to make sure that we're um, just being as visible as possible, because the more you have that viewpoint, that connection, the more it just tends to you tend to garner fans that may not have been familiar with what you've done, but they
Mm,
through those kind of connections, now you've gained that much more. So um, we knew it was very important. I mean, just being real here, we're one of the few all black creative teams working at a company that has a lot of titles. And
mhm,
these titles are all a lot of those titles are well known established titles, Walking Dead and Saga and Sex Criminal. All these different titles are, but these titles are dominating the shelves and dominating the comic book medium in a lot
mhm,
of ways. And so we knew that just merely having the book on the shelf wasn't enough. So we knew we needed to have uh, podcast interviews and in-store appearances, and definitely comic cons and everything else that we can possibly get our hands on to
yeah,
spread the word. And so yeah, the long answer there, but that's honestly why we took that break, and we knew we needed to do something that kind of bridged the gap between that break as well. So we put out that summer special,
right.
uh, the annual called the Red Summer, and that's something that we're extremely proud of, because it definitely gave us another unique way to connect and build our brand,
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, no, it was a really cool special because you get a like individual character deep dives. You get some other artists into the foray,
Hmm.
to see different takes on the characters in the world. So yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely recommend the Red Summer special for those people who might have missed it. Also researching the Red Summer because I did the same, and that was definitely it's a lot of insight and a lot of learning there
yeah.
as well if you're less familiar. I believe Bitterroot rights were purchased for film and TV. Is there any development on that end that you know about?
Yes, there is. I think that's all I can say about it right
Yeah, okay.
now.
That's usually the case, so no worries at all. That's cool,
Yeah.
though. Congrats on where that may be heading.
Right.
So are there any other things that you're working on currently, or is it heads down on Bitterroot until issue 10 is out, and then you go from there?
If I could retract, I can share this about the media
Yeah.
aspect of it. We do, it was announced that Ryan Coogler, his production company, has the film rights, so he'll be producing it. Ryan Coogler, known for producing, directing Black Panther
Mhm.
film at
Yeah, that's
Marvel.
awesome.
So, you know, um, couldn't think of anyone any better. I mean, there's a ton of great, talented directors and producers. Even more specifically, directors and producers of color. We were very um, intentional reaching out to uh, those creators. Kind of a side encouraging note. He reached out to us, so that
Oh,
was,
wow.
yeah, that definitely showed that what we were doing was registering and reaching the audiences that we was hoping for. So
That's amazing. Do you put together like I guess I'm less familiar, like a pitch document or something like that when you have a comic and you're trying to get, a very intentional licensing deal like that?
yeah, well, the comic is the pitch document, so
Yeah.
you know that's kind of a what is it? Kind of a known secret these days in Hollywood. Most people that want to do IPs or create um, these these concepts, they reach out to comic illustrators, what have you, to try to get a graphic novel done, so that they can have it for media.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Any other, like, comics work on your end that's upcoming that you can share?
Um, hmm. Well, I just finished something with DC, with Brian Michael Bendis, a Legion of Superheroes story. I think there's like, I don't know, a dozen creators working on this project. It's like one page
Yeah.
per artist. So just finished that, which was really cool.
Who'd you get to do? What Legion?
Lightning, Lightning Lad and Lightning Lass.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, if anyone's familiar with who they are, currently they're both black characters, brother and sister characters in the Legion, and so that was cool. Working on that. Um, for one page, it was a lot of drawing. A lot of drawing for one page. I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that I portrayed the characters. I wanted to what's the word? I wanted to give them um, space. So I had to make sure that I did the storytelling in a way to give them a little bit of an appearance.
Mhm.
So it took a minute for just one page to come about, but it was fun. It's
Nice.
definitely enjoyable.
Cool.
I think I'm sorry. I
No,
got
no, go ahead.
yeah. I got. I'm trying to think. My brain is kind of fried, man. I've got a few things, some cover works. I just did something with. I have to edit that part. Uh, I did something with did a cover for Far Sector, and I'm doing one for Batman and the Outsiders.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
some stuff over at Dark Horse. So yeah, I've mainly covers for right now. Can't really
Gotcha.
afford to do interior work.
Yeah, yeah, just I mean, time-wise, that's,
Yeah.
that's a tough one to pick up, I imagine. Very cool. No, this is awesome. This is a good conversation. I did wanna give you the opportunity, as we kinda come to a close, what do you think it is, in your own words, about Bitterroot that is so relevant today? And why do you think, more readers, those who might be less familiar with it, should check it out?
Why is it so relevant today? I guess just look around, right?
Yep.
It's like you see these monsters everywhere. I mean, I think, if I could kind of go down this rabbit hole, I think we've been seeing it for a minute. I think with social media, you're seeing it, live out in real time. Um, and this is even prior to um, George Floyd or any of the unfortunate um, victims of of this injustice, racial injustice specifically. Um, we've seen it long before this, but I think social media has definitely given us a spotlight, and of course, COVID has slowed the world down to a standstill to where everyone is seeing it all at once.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh man, I didn't realize this was happening or this bad. And I think that's part of why we're doing this story, because I think there's just being candid, there's a huge section of our world, country specifically, where there's blinders to um, the systemic nature of this thing, because systemic
Mhm.
is very, ambiguous in a lot of ways. Now, well, I should say is maybe not so much anymore, right? But it was, but now because of social media and things of that nature and other media, television and film and now graphic novels, comics,
Yeah.
we felt like we had a rich story, even way before any of this stuff happened, because we were seeing this stuff, and we were witnesses, and maybe even had our own personal experiences with it. I think all three of us, me, David, and Chuck, had some form of injustice happen because of the color of our skin, at some
Mhm.
point. So, as a creator, whatever your experiences are, you 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 want to, there's something subconscious that allows you to put it into creation, whether it be art or music or what have you.
Yeah.
That's where the most powerful stories and music comes from. It comes from those personal experiences. So um, I would say to people, if you are trying to gain even more understanding. Not saying that our book is like the ultimate in enlightenment, but I think the way that we're describing um, forms of hatred, and again, it's not just the overt hatred, the color of your skin hatred, or because you're different than me hatred. It's the, like you said earlier, it's just the own personal um, post traumatic um, situations that we go through, and how that can influence how we our outlook on other people, even our own people. And yeah, it's not clear cut, cookie cutter, dare I say, black and white.
Mhm.
It starts there, but then there's so many other levels, and we're doing this exploratory venture into those dynamics, and we would love for anyone who's interested in that to definitely check it out.
Awesome, awesome. Well said. Yeah, I would highly recommend the work to anybody listening as well. I think in addition to everything you said, it is also an exciting adventure, steampunk, monster hunting fantasy world, right? That you guys have built. So I
Right.
think it's quite impressive to pretty. I'm sure it's not effortlessly, but the way the story is told, it's seamlessly integrated
Hmm.
into what is otherwise a more familiar kind of genre. So
Right.
it's excellent work. I dig the book. I think everybody should check it out. Good luck to you guys on the Eisner nominations. I think the voting's going on right now, so I hope to see Bitterroot represented there. Um, yeah, so thanks so much for taking the time, Sanford. I know you got plenty of other things going on, so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me.